Stocks tumbling today after the credit agency Standard & Poor's downgraded the United States long-term financial outlook. That agency today reports that there is at least a 33% chance it will have to lower the U.S. credit rating in the next 2 years. That's important because a lower credit rating could hurt the United States' ability to secure future loans. And on top of that, the Treasury's on the verge of hitting the nation's debt ceiling, which now stands at $14.3 trillion. Timing? Interesting. Should Congress fail to raise that debt limit, which it cannot do, though it may, before the Treasury hits it, our government would essentially default on all loans. That would be a cataclysmic disaster for both the U.S. economy and America's standing in the world. An S&P analyst says, and I quote, "More than 2 years after the beginning of the recent crisis, U.S. policymakers have still not agreed on how to reverse recent fiscal deterioration or address long-term fiscal pressures." In the early trading, in the Dow Jones Industrial Average opened low and then plummeted more than 240 points. A graph of the day difference from the end of the session and today. We're off 161 now. Fox News senior judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano, who's also the host of Freedom Watch on the Fox Business Network, is with us. You know, anytime you see something like it's tax day, they're trying to raise this debt ceiling, which they're going to have to do. All this other, this is yakety, yakety, yak. It's just politics. We already borrowed the money. What are we supposed to now default on it? The United States government to default on its loans? Seriously?
There's a couple of arguments here. Senator Toomey of Pennsylvania, who was an economist before he was just elected to the Senate, has argued that there's enough tax revenue that comes in to pay the interest on the debt. There's certainly not enough tax revenue to pay the principal on the debt. And about $2 trillion of the $14 trillion has to be paid back in the next year and a half. What the government will probably do is borrow money, perhaps from the same people to whom it owes it, and just recast the loan. The issue here, though, is we really have not had serious questioning of the ability of the federal government to pay back its debt since the Civil War. That's how consistently the federal government has paid back its debt, in part because the Constitution requires it to do so, in part because we're in such a habit of borrowing that the day we stop paying back in a timely manner is the day we either can't borrow anymore or have to borrow at very high interest rates, which could be the likely outcome of this opinion today. Not only did stocks go down, but interest rates will go up. When you go to the federal government to borrow a great deal of money, you haggle over the interest rates. The federal government wants to borrow more money than you want to loan, so they dangle a higher interest rate in front of you.
Who do these three credit ratings get paid for again by now?
They actually get paid by the people to whom they deliver their services, which is the banks and the federal government itself.
So they rate for the banks and they work for the banks. And if I remember, they gave great ratings to Fannie, Freddie, and all the big banks. They gave them great ratings.
One of them in particular, whose name I won't
really great.
Whose name I won't mention, and it's not the one in issue today, did come under a lot of pressure for having given those ratings. Look, is it a coincidence that this came out today, as you pointed out in the intro, on tax day and on the very day after Secretary Geithner said to the public yesterday in one of the talk shows, other Republicans are going to vote to raise that, and if they don't, maybe something will scare them into it soon? I don't know. These rating agencies maintain they have intellectual honesty, and the very economist who made this decision has a very excellent reputation. What pressures may have been put to bear on him, who knows?
You brought some human rights stuff up here.
Well, I did, because, you know, I watch this stuff for a living, and you and I talk about it a lot. The Constitution requires the federal government to pay back its debt. But the federal government has looked the other way in many, many areas of the Constitution, like who can start a war, and can people be tortured, and can they be tried before military tribunals instead of before juries? So if they will avoid some parts of the Constitution, will they avoid others? This economist did not make this argument, but it is an argument that is being made when you talk about whether or not the federal government will pay back its debts.
So what you're saying is the Constitution is not a cafeteria plan. You can't just pick and choose which entrees and side dishes you want. The Constitution is there for you, like if you're a religious person, kind of like the Bible is. You can't have part of it, not all of it.
They took an oath to uphold the entire Constitution, that is the President and the Congress, not just the parts that they agree with. If they raise the debt ceiling, we will be borrowing money to pay back money we've already borrowed. If they don't raise the debt ceiling, then they'll be true to the arguments they made to the electorate that they were going to slow the spending and stop the borrowing. They claim that they're going to get the president to give them some kind of a deal, the power to borrow in return for the power to stop spending. Well, no, in about 2 weeks, when they reach the debt ceiling, when the government was not lawfully authorized to borrow any more money.
We'll look forward to that day.
Yes, we'll be talking about this again. They won't decide until the 11th hour, just like they did with the budget.
Of course they won't, and there'll be lots of drama and politicking and extra junk in there that nobody...
And good television.
Well, it's aggravating television to this television person. It's nice to see you, sir.
Good to see you,
So you had a good weekend, right?
I did, and you?
Rebels swept Kentucky on the baseball field.
Oh, no wonder you're so
I had a
happy.
spectacular weekend. Things are good. First place in the West.
All right.
Hotty toddy. Good job, Bianco. You can catch the Judge weeknights on the Fox Business Network. He's the anchor of a relatively new program that if you haven't checked out, you might want to consider it. It's really good. It's called Freedom Watch. It's at 8 o'clock in the evening Eastern Time, so 7 o'clock in Oxford when Swayze is crazy. It's 7 o'clock there. And if you don't get the Fox Business Network, demand it! Demand the dang thing. Judge, thanks.
Thank you, Shep.